Werewolf, 1987 to 1988, TV show review. The late 80s saw the emergence of a handful of horror-themed TV shows, and one of the more obscure yet interesting ones was Werewolf, created by Frank Lupo. The series, which ran for only one season between 1987 and 1988, wasn't a huge hit, but it has gathered a loyal cult following over the years. With its mixture of supernatural elements, werewolf mythology, and gritty storytelling, it definitely stood out among the other shows of its time. The plot of Werewolf. At the heart of the show is Eric Cord, played by John J. York, a young man cursed with lycanthropy after a brutal encounter with a werewolf. The series begins with Eric hunting down the creature that cursed him in an attempt to break the curse, but as he discovers, it's not as simple as just killing the creature that turned him. Over the course of the show, Eric becomes a sort of wandering hero, trying to maintain his humanity while dealing with his curse and looking for the ultimate cure. What set Werewolf apart from other werewolf media at the time was the episodic nature of the show. Instead of focusing on one central villain or enemy, each episode of Werewolf explored different aspects of Eric's curse, while also incorporating the psychological toll that being a werewolf had on him. The show blended a mix of action, drama, and monster of the week stories, making it a unique take on the werewolf genre. The characters of Werewolf, John J. York's portrayal of Eric Cord was a standout performance. He was a deeply sympathetic character, struggling with the monster inside him while still trying to be a good person. You could really feel the internal conflict he went through as he tried to maintain control of his humanity while becoming a werewolf. The role required a lot of emotional depth and physical transformation. Dad and York managed to balance the two quite well. Alongside Eric Cord, there were a few other characters who contributed to the series, such as his mentor and the man who first helped him in his quest for redemption. These secondary characters, though not as developed as Eric, added layers to the story and often played roles in pushing the plot forward. One of the interesting things about Werewolf was how it took the standard werewolf mythology and gave it a personal twist. Instead of just dealing with the supernatural aspect, Eric's journey was very much about personal loss, redemption, and trying to break free from his curse. He had to learn to cope with both his transformation and the emotional consequences of being a werewolf. Themes of the show. The show dealt with themes like guilt, responsibility, and the struggle between good and evil. Eric's search for redemption and a cure to his curse was central to the show. There was a constant tension between his desire to maintain his humanity and the uncontrollable force of the werewolf within him. This created an emotional depth to the show that was rarely seen in werewolf-based TV shows or movies at the time. It wasn't just about being a monster. It was about how being a monster affected someone's soul and psyche. Additionally, the show explored the theme of vengeance, as Eric's quest was partially driven by his need to avenge his transformation. His journey, however, became more about seeking a cure and reclaiming his life than just pure revenge, which was an interesting direction for the genre. There was also a lot of focus on isolation. Being a werewolf meant that Eric had to distance himself from others, as he didn't want to hurt anyone during his transformations. This theme of loneliness, combined with his fear of hurting others, created a tragic arc for Eric. The werewolf genre in the 80s. Werewolf came at a time when werewolf films were very popular, especially after An American Werewolf in London, 1981, and The Howling, 1981, had helped bring the genre into the mainstream. But in terms of TV shows, werewolf stories were rarer. Shows like The Monster Squad, 1987, and movies like Teen Wolf, 1985, were taking werewolf stories into the teen and family genres, while Werewolf aimed to take the mythology in a darker, more serious direction. The show was part of a larger trend in the 80s of darker, more brooding heroes with tragic backstories. Think of shows like The Incredible Hulk or Knight Rider, which featured protagonists dealing with some sort of curse or transformation. Werewolf fit into this mold. But its unique twist was the supernatural aspect, which gave it a little more horror flair compared to the other action-oriented shows of the time. Why did it fail to last? Despite its potential, Werewolf was canceled after just one season, and there are a few reasons why it didn't last longer. First, it was somewhat overshadowed by the success of other supernatural TV shows like The X-Files and Buffy the Vampire Slayer that would eventually come along in the 90s. At the time, Werewolf was competing with other action-heavy series, and it didn't quite find the audience it needed to thrive. Also, while the themes and emotional depth were definitely interesting, the show's Monster of the Week format became a bit repetitive, and the low budget didn't help in making the werewolf transformations feel as polished or engaging as they could have been. There were other werewolf-centric TV shows at the time, like the Howling series, that might have outshone it in terms of budget and quality of effects. Another issue was the time slot. Werewolf aired on the Fox network, which was still in its early years of programming and didn't have a solid identity at the time. It could have suffered from inconsistent marketing or simply not reaching the right audience. All these factors combined meant that Werewolf couldn't gather enough traction to earn a second season. Influence and legacy. Even though Werewolf didn't last long, it has become a bit of a cult classic in the world of supernatural TV. It remains a nostalgic favorite for fans of 80s horror and action TV shows. The show is remembered for its unique approach to the werewolf mythos and its dark, emotional character study of Eric Cord. In terms of influence, Werewolf definitely paved the way for future TV shows about supernatural creatures that also explored the human side of these monstrous transformations. Shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Supernatural, and Teen Wolf owe a little bit to Werewolf for pushing the envelope in terms of emotional depth in horror-based TV shows.